Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now, what would you do if you suddenly woke up inside a Mafia BL novel, only to discover that you are not the protagonist, not the villain, but the doomed butler destined to die for the Mafia Lord? Would you try to change the story? Or would you run away before the plot could kill you? Well, Kyler Wilson, our doomed butler, certainly tried. He only wanted to survive, collect his salary, resign, and escape. But there's one tiny bit of a problem. Alastair Varelli can hear his every thoughts, his sarcasm, his complaints, his escape plans, and instead of letting him go, the Mafia Lord becomes completely obsessed with him. So, are you guys ready for this chaotic story? Let's dive in. And before diving, don't forget to check out my Patreon page for early access and exclusive bonus contents. Link in the comment. Now, let's dive into our story. Happy listening, everyone.
Chapter 1. I died and became the Mafia Lord's butler. Owen Wilson was 22 years old, a perfectly ordinary college student with perfectly ordinary problems. Money, assignments, rent. And the eternal question of every broke student. What am I going to eat tomorrow? He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous. He didn't have a mysterious billionaire uncle waiting to leave him an inheritance. But Owen was happy. He attended college during the day and worked part-time in the evenings. His tiny apartment wasn't luxurious, his clothes weren't expensive, and his bank account regularly looked like it was going through a personal tragedy. But it was his life, and he loved it. Well, most of it. There was one thing Owen loved more than sleeping after a long shift. BL and GL novels, especially the ridiculous ones. The more dramatic, the better. The kind where the CEO could buy an entire company because someone looked at his lover for 3 seconds. The kind where the Mafia Lord had 12 assassination attempts before breakfast. The kind where the protagonist somehow survived being kidnapped 17 times despite having the survival instincts of a potato. And tonight, Owen had just finished one of those novels. Unfortunately, it was also the worst Mafia BL novel he'd ever read. He stared at his phone. You're telling me? He slowly scrolled through the final chapter. That this idiot survived getting kidnapped 6 times? Scroll. The Mafia Lord destroyed 3 rival families. Scroll. And the butler died protecting him? Owen's mouth twitched. Of course. He dropped his phone onto the bed. Obviously, the butler dies. The novel's Mafia Lord was Alastair Varelli, 28 years old, the infamous head of the Varelli crime empire. Tall, broad-shouldered, black hair, sharp gray eyes, a face so handsome it was frankly offensive. Cold, ruthless, ridiculously powerful, and apparently allergic to smiling. According to the novel, Alastair trusted nobody. Except the original protagonist. Naturally, he was going to fall madly in love with him. Owen snorted. What a cliché. And then there was the butler. The loyal butler who stayed beside Alastair until the very end. The loyal butler who eventually sacrificed himself to save his master. The loyal butler who, wait, Owen frowned. Why am I feeling sleepy? His vision blurred. He blinked. Once. Twice. His head hit the pillow. Tomorrow, I'll find a better novel. And that was the last thing Owen remembered. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing in front of an enormous mirror. Owen stared at his reflection, then stared again. His messy brown hair was gone. His face looked different, sharper. His skin was clearer. His body was slimmer but more refined. He was wearing an expensive black butler's uniform. Owen touched his face. What? A maid passing behind him immediately bowed. Good morning, Mr. Wilson. Owen slowly turned. Wilson? The maid smiled politely. Yes, Mr. Kyler Wilson. Silence. Owen's brain stopped functioning. Kyler Wilson. Then the memories came rushing in. The mansion, the servants, the Varelli family, the novel, the butler, his death. Owen's face went pale. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. He was no longer Owen Wilson. He was now Kyler Wilson, 22 years old. The personal butler of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Heavy, calm, unhurried. Everyone immediately straightened. Owen, or rather Kyler, slowly turned. And there he was. Alastair Varelli. 28 years old, the Mafia Lord. Tall, elegant, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, with black hair neatly pushed away from his forehead and cold gray eyes that could probably make a grown man confess to crimes he hadn't committed. Kyler stared. Oh, wonderful. I didn't get reincarnated as the protagonist. I didn't get reincarnated as the villain. I got reincarnated as the disposable employee. He remembered everything. The original Kyler was Alastair's loyal butler. He would remain by his side through countless conflicts, and eventually die protecting him. Kyler internally screamed, absolutely not. He immediately created a survival plan. Rule 1. Don't interfere with the plot. Rule 2. Don't become emotionally attached. Rule 3. Save money. Rule 4. Resign. Rule 5. Run so far that even the author can't find him. Simple, perfect, flawless. What could possibly go wrong? Kyler stepped forward and bowed. Good morning, Master Varelli. Alastair's cold gaze settled on him. Kyler smiled politely. Inside his head, however, why does he look like he personally invented murder? Alastair's expression remained unchanged. Does this man ever smile? His eyebrow twitched. Probably not. His facial muscles have probably resigned. Alastair stopped walking. Kyler froze. Why did he stop? Alastair stared at him. Kyler's smile became slightly more nervous. Did I say that aloud? Alastair said nothing, but something strange was happening. He could hear a voice, not from the hallway, not from the servants, not from anywhere. It was coming from his butler. Alastair glanced around. Nobody else seemed to react. His eyes returned to Kyler. This man looks like he personally invented murder. Alastair's gaze sharpened. Did I just hear that? He remained silent. Perhaps he was imagining things. Perhaps he was finally losing his mind. After all, running a criminal empire wasn't exactly good for one's mental health. He needed to test it. Bring me tea. Kyler immediately bowed. Of course, master. He turned and walked away. Alastair watched him. Kyler returned moments later with tea. He placed the cup carefully in front of him. Alastair picked it up. And then, he drinks tea like a man preparing to execute someone. Alastair nearly choked. His hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Kyler immediately noticed. Oh my God, did he just choke because I made the tea too strong? Am I about to get fired on my first day? Alastair slowly lowered the cup. He stared at Kyler. He really thinks I'm going to fire him because of tea. Kyler stared back nervously. Neither spoke. The room became painfully quiet. Finally, Alastair took another sip. Acceptable. Kyler blinked. Thank you, master. Inside his head, that sounded like a threat. Alastair almost smiled. Almost. Kyler quickly left the room, and Alastair watched him go. Interesting. Very interesting. Over the next few days, Alastair quietly tested his strange new ability. And Kyler unknowingly made the experiment incredibly entertaining. Whenever Alastair prepared to make a decision, he's going to accept that deal. Alastair rejected it. Kyler stared. Wait, wasn't he supposed to accept it? Alastair calmly signed another document. Kyler narrowed his eyes. Did the plot just glitch? Alastair's lips twitched. Later, Kyler watched Alastair prepare for a meeting. This meeting is going to end terribly. Alastair canceled it. Kyler stood there in disbelief. What the hell is happening? Alastair leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, the Mafia Lord found himself genuinely amused. His butler knew things he shouldn't. He thought things he definitely shouldn't. And most importantly, he had absolutely no idea Alastair could hear any of it. Kyler walked away, still completely confused about why the story was suddenly changing. Alastair watched his retreating figure. A faint smile finally appeared on his lips. Interesting. For the first time in years, the Mafia Lord was genuinely curious about someone. And unfortunately, for Kyler, that someone was him. Chapter 2, My Boss is Acting Weird. After discovering that the plot was apparently capable of changing itself, Kyler Wilson made a very important decision. He was going to stay out of it. Unfortunately, Alastair Varelli had other plans. The 28-year-old Mafia Lord had discovered something far more entertaining than the criminal underworld. His 22-year-old butler's thoughts. And Alastair had decided to conduct an experiment. His first test was tea. Kyler. Yes, master? Bring me the black tea from the eastern cabinet. Kyler nodded. He knew that tea. Alastair hated it. Kyler had read the novel. He remembered Alastair complaining about its bitter taste. He's going to complain about this. Kyler served it. Alastair took a sip. Silence. Kyler waited. Alastair took another sip. It's acceptable. Kyler's eyes widened. What? Alastair nearly smiled. He had to look down at his cup to hide it. Interesting. The second test was a business deal. Kyler stood quietly beside Alastair during a meeting with another Mafia family. He recognized the scene immediately. Oh, this is the deal. He remembered exactly what happened in the novel. Alastair would accept the proposal. 3 weeks later, the family would betray him. Kyler sighed internally. He's going to accept this deal and regret it later. Alastair looked at the contract, then at the man sitting across from him. No. The room went silent. Kyler's head snapped toward him. What? The other man looked stunned. But Mr. Varelli, I've changed my mind. Kyler stared at him. Since when does this walking red flag have character development? Alastair immediately looked away. His shoulders almost shook. He was trying not to laugh. And that became their routine. Kyler predicted something. Alastair changed it. Kyler thought Alastair would kill someone. Alastair spared them. Kyler thought an assassination attempt was coming. Alastair avoided it. Kyler thought he's definitely going to make another terrible decision. Alastair would immediately change his decision. Soon, the supposedly untouchable Mafia Lord was secretly following the advice of a butler who didn't even know he was giving advice. And Kyler was becoming increasingly suspicious. Master, yes? Have you been behaving differently lately? Alastair calmly drank his tea. No. He's lying. Alastair's lips twitched. Kyler narrowed his eyes, definitely lying. Then came Damon. Damon Blackwood, Alastair's 30-year-old right-hand man, was terrifying. Tall, muscular, permanently expressionless, and so serious that Kyler suspected Damon had been born wearing a suit. He had served Alastair for years, which meant he knew exactly how unusual the situation was. One evening, Damon watched Alastair smile. He blinked. Then blinked again. Boss? Alastair looked up. Yes? You've been smiling lately. Have I? Damon stared at him. Yes. Alastair looked toward Kyler. Kyler was organizing documents. Inside his head. Someone saved Damon. He has no idea what's happening. Alastair's mouth twitched. Damon noticed. Sir. Nothing. Kyler glanced over. He's definitely plotting someone's murder. Alastair calmly answered in his head. Not today. Damon narrowed his eyes. He was beginning to suspect that his boss had finally lost his mind. Then Felix entered the disaster. Felix, 24, was one of Alastair's younger subordinates. He was loyal. He was energetic. He was also an idiot. One morning, Felix accidentally knocked over an expensive vase. Crash! Everyone froze. Felix stared at the pieces. Kyler stared at Felix. He's dead. Felix looked terrified. Alastair looked at Kyler. Then calmly said, Clean it up. Felix blinked. That's it? That's it? Kyler stared. The plot really has gone insane. Alastair almost smiled again. Damon quietly walked away. He had decided not to get involved. Then came the assassination attempt. It happened during dinner. Kyler recognized the setting immediately. His blood ran cold. Oh no, this was the scene. The scene where an assassin would shoot Alastair. The scene where the original butler would throw himself in front of him. The scene where absolutely not. Kyler looked around desperately. Then he saw it. A figure moving behind Alastair. A gun. Kyler didn't think. He grabbed the nearest object. Unfortunately, the nearest object was a silver serving tray. He threw it. Clang! The tray smashed into the assassin's face. Silence. Everyone stared. The assassin stared. Damon stared. Felix stared. Alastair slowly turned around. Kyler stared at the tray lying on the floor. Alastair raised an eyebrow. Did you just attack an assassin with a serving tray? Kyler straightened. Reflex. I have absolutely no idea why I did that. Alastair heard every word, and something inside him shifted. Kyler wasn't merely trying to survive anymore. He had genuinely been afraid Alastair would die. Before Alastair could say anything else, another assassin attacked. This time, Alastair moved. Fast, cold, efficient. Within seconds, the threat was gone. The room fell silent. Alastair turned toward Kyler. You endangered yourself. Kyler blinked. You're welcome? That wasn't praise. Kyler smiled politely. Then you're welcome for the criticism, sir. Damon covered his mouth. Felix turned away. Both were desperately trying not to laugh. Alastair simply stared at Kyler. Then he smiled. Not because the joke was particularly funny, but because Kyler had made him smile. And Alastair was beginning to realize he liked that. Months passed, and somehow the mansion became a complete circus. Kyler's sarcastic thoughts became Alastair's favorite entertainment. Why does Felix have access to weapons? He can't even open a pickle jar? Alastair immediately reassigned Felix. Damon needs a vacation. Alastair gave Damon 3 days off. Damon looks suspicious. Alastair hasn't smiled in 28 years and suddenly he's smiling every morning. This is terrifying. Alastair smiled more. Kyler groaned internally. Great. I made the Mafia Lord happy. I'm definitely doomed. Alastair, you have no idea. But something else changed. Slowly. Quietly. Without Alastair noticing. He began looking for Kyler whenever he entered a room. He noticed when Kyler skipped meals. He noticed when Kyler looked tired. He noticed which desserts Kyler liked. He began canceling meetings when Kyler was exhausted. He bought an entire restaurant because Kyler once thought that cake looks good. Kyler stared at the restaurant's grand opening sign. Master. Yes? Why did you buy a restaurant? Alastair calmly answered. I wanted cake. Kyler stared at him. Liar. Alastair smiled, and somewhere along the way, Alastair's curiosity became attachment. Attachment became affection. Affection became something far more dangerous. Obsession. He didn't know when it happened. Maybe it was the first time Kyler threw himself between him and a bullet. Maybe it was when Kyler stayed awake all night after Alastair returned injured. Maybe it was simply the fact that Kyler's voice was now the first thing Alastair wanted to hear every morning. Whatever the reason, Alastair had become completely accustomed to having him nearby. And then Kyler made a terrible decision. He decided to leave. That night, Kyler quietly packed his belongings. He looked around his room. No mafia, no assassins, no terrifying boss, no suspiciously handsome man who stared at him too much. Freedom, peace. He smiled. I'm finally getting out. He left the mansion. He made it 1 street, then 2, then 3. A black car stopped beside him. The rear door opened. Kyler slowly turned. Alastair sat inside, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, perfectly terrifying. Kyler stared. Alastair stared back. Kyler looked at the road, then at Alastair. How did you find me? Alastair smiled, and finally decided there was no point hiding anymore. I heard your thoughts, Kyler froze. His entire soul left his body. What? Alastair stepped out of the car. I've heard them from the beginning. Kyler's face went blank. Every embarrassing thought he'd ever had flashed through his mind, every insult, every sarcastic comment, every time he'd called Alastair a red flag, every time he'd secretly worried about him. Every escape plan, everything. Kyler whispered, I'm going to kill myself. Alastair calmly replied, No. Kyler stared. Alastair opened the car door. You're coming home. I resign. I reject your resignation. You can't do that. I already did. That's not how employment works. It is now? Kyler stared at him in disbelief. Alastair's expression softened. You've been trying to leave me for months. Kyler swallowed. And? Alastair stepped closer. You're not going anywhere. Kyler's eyes widened, and for the first time he understood something truly terrifying. The Mafia Lord hadn't merely been listening to his thoughts. He had fallen in love with them. Alastair reached for his wrist. Come home, Kyler. And unfortunately for Kyler, that was how his peaceful life officially ended. Chapter 3. The Mafia Lord's butler is no longer allowed to resign. I heard your thoughts. The words hit Kyler harder than any bullet ever could. He stared at Alastair. Alastair stared back. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Kyler slowly pointed at himself. My thoughts? Yes. My inner thoughts? Every single one. Kyler's face went pale. His entire life flashed before his eyes. Oh no. Alastair raised an eyebrow. Kyler swallowed. Please tell me he didn't hear that. I did. Kyler's soul left his body. He immediately tried another test. If you can actually hear this, scratch your eyebrow. Alastair scratched his eyebrow. Kyler's eyes widened. Oh, we're screwed. Alastair smiled. Kyler took one step backward. If this man can hear everything I've thought for the past year, I need to move to another country. Alastair calmly replied, Which country? Kyler turned around and ran. He made it approximately 7 steps. A very large man grabbed him from behind. Let me go! Another man opened the car door. Kyler kicked. This is kidnapping. Alastair calmly watched. You work for me. I resigned. I rejected your resignation. You can't reject a resignation. I just did. Kyler was shoved gently but firmly into the car. He glared at Alastair. Congratulations. You've officially become a kidnapping red flag with cheekbones. Alastair smiled. Damon, sitting in the front, quietly looked at Felix. Felix whispered, Boss is smiling again. Damon sighed. We're doomed. When Kyler returned to the mansion, he discovered a new problem, and he wasn't an employee anymore. Alastair sat behind his desk looking completely calm. You are not just my butler now. Kyler narrowed his eyes. What am I? Alastair looked directly at him. My beloved. Kyler stared. I didn't apply for that position. You don't need to. I resign. No. I quit. No. I'm going to start a bakery. I'll buy it. I'll move to another country. I'll buy a house there. I'll join a monastery. I'll build one. Kyler stared at him. This man is financially ruining my escape plans. Alastair smiled. You're also my weakness. Kyler groaned. That's not in my employment contract. I changed the contract. Of course you did. Unfortunately for Alastair, kidnapping his sarcastic butler came with consequences. Kyler decided that if he couldn't escape, he would become unbearable. He deliberately served Alastair terrible coffee. One morning, Alastair took a sip. He paused. Kyler watched him. Say something. Alastair calmly swallowed. Interesting. That's not coffee. That's liquid revenge. Alastair looked at him. I know. Kyler nearly dropped the tray. Know what? Nothing. Kyler also discovered that knowing Alastair could hear his thoughts was surprisingly useful. During meetings, he mentally renamed everyone. Damon became Stoneface. Felix became Walking Disaster. One particularly frightening lieutenant became Mr. Eyebrows. And Alastair, Walking Red Flag with Cheekbones. Alastair sat through meetings looking completely serious while internally trying not to laugh. Damon eventually noticed. Boss, why are you smiling? Alastair glanced at Kyler. Nothing. Kyler thought, he's laughing at my thoughts again. Alastair smiled wider. Damon closed his eyes. I don't want to know. But Alastair didn't just listen. He began changing his entire life around Kyler. Kyler casually thought that he was tired. The next morning, half of Alastair's meetings were canceled. Kyler once thought a restaurant's chocolate cake looked delicious. 3 days later, Alastair owned the restaurant. Kyler stared at the sign. Did you buy this place? Yes. Why? You wanted the cake. I wanted one slice. You can have the whole restaurant. Kyler covered his face. I married a psychopath with unlimited money. Alastair paused. We're not married yet. Kyler froze. I hate your telepathy. I know. Then Alastair became ridiculous about security. 2 guards followed Kyler. Then 4, then 8, then 12. One afternoon, Kyler walked toward the kitchen. Damon followed. Behind him came 6 armed men. Behind them came Felix. Behind Felix came another group of guards. Kyler stopped. He slowly turned around. Why does going to the kitchen look like a presidential convoy? Damon answered seriously. Your safety is the boss's priority. Kyler stared at him. I'm literally going to get a sandwich. Alastair's voice came through the intercom. Take another 4 men. Kyler's jaw dropped. Alastair! A faint laugh came through the speaker. Despite the chaos, something unexpected happened. Alastair began encouraging Kyler to return to college. One evening, he placed a university application in front of him. Kyler stared at it. What's this? Your application. For what? Business. Kyler looked up. You want me to study business? You understand people, you understand money, and you constantly criticize my business decisions. I criticize everything. I know. Alastair leaned back. You should have a life outside this mansion. Kyler went quiet. That was the first time Alastair didn't sound possessive. He sounded sincere. So Kyler returned to college, and naturally, chaos followed. Alastair sent him to campus with 7 guards. Kyler reduced them to 2. Alastair increased them to 6. Kyler threatened to drop out. Alastair reduced them to 3. It became a negotiation. Somehow, Kyler actually enjoyed studying business, and Alastair secretly attended several of his presentations from the back of the classroom. The Mafia Lord, sitting among college students wearing sunglasses indoors. Damon whispered, "Boss, you look suspicious." Alastair replied, "I'm observing." Kyler glanced toward the back. "Why does that man look like a criminal hiding from the police?" Alastair smiled. Their relationship didn't become perfect overnight. Kyler still annoyed him. Alastair was still possessive. Kyler still threatened to leave whenever Alastair went too far. But slowly, Kyler began staying because he wanted to. He discovered Alastair secretly liked classical music. Alastair discovered Kyler fell asleep while reading. Kyler learned that the terrifying Mafia Lord hated thunderstorms. Alastair learned that Kyler secretly worried about everyone but pretended not to care. They fought, they laughed, they argued over ridiculous things, and somewhere between sarcastic arguments and late-night conversations, Kyler stopped thinking about escaping, because the man who had once been nothing more than a character in a novel had slowly become his home. Then the original protagonist finally appeared. According to the novel, this was supposed to be the moment Alastair fell in love. The beautiful original protagonist stood before Alastair. He smiled charmingly. "Mr. Varelli." Alastair stared at him. 3 seconds passed. 5, 10. Finally, "Who?" Kyler nearly choked on his drink. The original protagonist's smile disappeared. Damon looked at the ceiling. Felix bit his fist. Kyler thought the original love interest just got rejected by the man he's supposed to marry. Alastair looked toward Kyler. "Because I already found mine." Kyler's ears turned red. He immediately looked away. But the novel wasn't finished fighting back. Old enemies returned. Mafia families formed an alliance against Alastair. Someone inside the Varelli organization betrayed him. And during the chaos, Kyler was kidnapped. The moment Alastair discovered it, the entire mansion went silent. Damon had never seen his boss look like that. Felix stopped joking. Alastair simply said, "Find him." The entire criminal empire moved. Alastair personally led the rescue. The fight was brutal. Gunfire echoed through the abandoned warehouse. Damon fought like a machine. Felix somehow managed to defeat 2 men with a chair. Kyler, tied to a chair in the corner, stared at him. Why is Felix fighting like he's auditioning for a circus? Felix somehow heard nothing. Alastair did. Even in the middle of the chaos, he almost smiled. Then he reached Kyler. "Are you hurt?" Kyler shook his head. "No." Alastair pulled him into his arms. For once, Kyler didn't make a sarcastic comment. He simply held him back. And Alastair realized something. He had spent years building an empire. But Kyler was the first thing he had ever truly feared losing. The final battle came soon after. The rival mafia families attacked the Varelli Empire. Alastair had 2 choices: protect his empire or protect Kyler. He chose both. Using information Kyler remembered from the original novel, they predicted the enemy's movements. Damon handled the traitors. Felix sabotaged their communications. Kyler discovered the hidden financial network, and Alastair finished the war. By sunrise, the Varelli Empire still stood. The enemies were defeated, and Kyler was alive. Alastair had saved his empire. But more importantly, he had saved his family. Months later, Alastair stood before Kyler in a beautifully decorated hall. Kyler stared at him. "Are you proposing?" "Yes. You could have asked normally. I wanted to surprise you. You kidnapped me the first time. I've improved." Kyler laughed. Debatable. They married surrounded by the people who had somehow become their chaotic family. Damon stood beside Alastair looking painfully serious. Felix cried harder than Kyler. "I'm so happy for you." Damon looked embarrassed. "Please stop crying." "I'm not crying. You've been crying for 20 minutes. Kyler laughed. Alastair simply held his hand. When Kyler eventually asked him, "Why me?" Alastair looked at him quietly. Because you were the first person who entered my life and thought I was an idiot. Kyler stared. I still think you're an idiot. I know. You're terrifying. I know. You're possessive. I know. You're literally a walking red flag. I know. And you kidnapped me. Alastair smiled. I would do it again. Kyler sighed. You're impossible. Alastair pulled him closer. And you're still here. Kyler looked up at him. Unfortunately, he was right. 1.5 years into their marriage, their mansion became even more chaotic. Because Kyler gave birth to triplets. Elliot Varelli, Leon Varelli, and Luca Varelli. 3 tiny babies, 3 future heirs, 3 tiny dictators. Alastair, the terrifying Mafia Lord who had once made entire criminal families tremble with a single look, was now standing in the nursery holding a baby bottle. Which one is hungry? Damon stared at the 3 babies. I believe all 3. Felix walked in carrying 6 bags. I bought toys. Damon looked at him. They are 3 months old. I panicked. Kyler laughed from the bed. Alastair looked at his children, then at Kyler. His expression softened. For the first time, the infamous Mafia Lord had something he never knew he wanted. A family. And his terrifying subordinates had discovered something even more frightening than their boss. The 3 tiny Varelli heirs. The moment one baby cried, 12 fully armed mafia men appeared. If one baby sneezed, 3 doctors arrived. If one baby smiled, Felix nearly started crying. The once feared Varelli mansion had officially become Rainbow and Cloud's headquarters. Damon stood in the hallway holding a stuffed rabbit. He stared at it, then at the baby, then at Alastair. Boss? What? The child took my weapon. Alastair looked at his son, who was happily chewing on Damon's gun holster. Let him have it. Damon's eyes widened. Sir, that's loaded. Alastair calmly removed it. Then don't leave weapons around my children. Damon sighed. Yes, boss. Kyler laughed. I can't believe this is my life. Alastair looked toward him. You wouldn't change it. Kyler smiled. No. He looked around the mansion, at Damon, at Felix, at their 3 children, then at the man beside him. His mafia king, his husband, his obsession, his home. Kyler thought quietly I should have just stayed dead. Alastair smiled. You say that a lot. Kyler groaned. You're still listening? Always? Kyler rolled his eyes. Of course. Alastair wrapped an arm around him, and for once, Kyler didn't complain. Because he had entered this novel determined to survive. Instead, he had rewritten the entire story. He destroyed the original romance, changed the fate of a mafia empire, accidentally became the most important person in the underworld, married the most dangerous man alive, and somehow ended up with 3 tiny heirs who had already conquered half the mansion. The story was supposed to end with the butler dying for his master. Instead, the butler became the Mafia Lord's greatest love. And this time, the ending belonged to them. A chaotic mansion, a terrifying mafia king, a sarcastic butler who never stopped complaining. 3 tiny troublemakers, and a love that was never supposed to exist in the original story. But perhaps that was the best part of transmigrating into a novel. Sometimes, the characters write a better ending themselves.